Hello and welcome to Driven by Doing podcast. Today we have Ben Ivey from London, UK. Ben, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
So, Ben, you have got a very inspiring story, and we definitely wanted to deep dive into a lot of stuff that you have been doing around the world. And you're a TEDx speaker, international speaker, and you're bilingual and inspired a lot of thousands of people from around the world. So, let's go back to your journey, beginning from your childhood days. Like, what were you like as a kid?
Sure. Well, as a kid, I think I worked pretty hard. I actually found it pretty difficult when I first started out. Probably until I was about 13 or 14, I was bullied quite a bit. I didn't really have that many friends, and I found it pretty challenging. I used to do a lot of gaming, and I worked hard in school. But from a social standpoint, I did find it quite challenging until my early teenage years, and then I managed to grow up and started to have friends from a few different areas of life. And I started to move forward. And when my parents got divorced at 15, I think I grew up very quickly. And I started to be like the man in the household. And because of that, I feel that I matured very quickly. And that enabled me to really work hard on taking responsibility for my life early on, as opposed to having other people push me.
So, and you actually shared how a lot of things in your life have actually changed your trajectory and got to where you are today. Let's deep dive into that. And then you went to college, and do you wanted to become an entrepreneur at that stage?
Well, when I went to college or university, depending on who's listening, I did economics and Mandarin, and to be honest, my trajectory that I was aiming for was something to do with business or finance or banking, something like that, because I was very good with numbers, and I thought that it would be a fantastic opportunity to be in the city, meeting people, having fun, and making money, and doing what I enjoy, and that was very much what I was planning on doing. And then, whilst I was at university, I had an opportunity to learn Mandarin with economics. And then I had an opportunity to go to China. I joined entrepreneurial groups, and my entrepreneurial journey started. And I had a few different projects. And to be honest, I think I was quite entrepreneurial from a young age. I was selling chocolate at school. Unfortunately, that was closed down when they found out how many pound coins I had in my locker. But at university, I ended up setting up a business where I was selling sports bags in the university, and then I started to expand that into other areas as well. And then I ran that for a little bit, then decided to set up an app in Silicon Valley to help people learn very quickly using memory techniques people use called the memory palace. It's the same technique people use when they memorize cards, and to digitalize it and gamify it. And we had a team, we started expanding. And then I had an opportunity to see one of my heroes. And for me, this was a fantastic time, and for those listening, if you had a chance to see one of your heroes, I'm sure you'd be incredibly excited. I know I was feeling over the moon. I got into my car, I started driving, I was late, I was like, oh my God, I gotta make it, gotta make it. And then I finally saw him, and it was an amazing opportunity to spend time with that person. And for those listening, if you can imagine spending time with the person you care most about in the world and that hero, it was an incredible experience for me. But what happened next really shifted my trajectory with what I was doing. I was focused on an app, making money, being able to have an impact after I was successful. And what happened to me is that the very next day my hero committed suicide. And for those listening, I can't really explain what that's like, where someone can fully understand, except it was just this gut-wrenching feeling of knowing that I genuinely had no idea. And the truth is, that hero wasn't just a random person. That hero was really my dad. And losing him completely changed the trajectory of what I was going through, because when you have someone that is so close to you and you have no idea what's going on, suddenly you start to question a lot of what you do in life. And for myself, I was thinking, why am I doing what I'm doing? And I figured that I had pretty much this addiction, and I feel that a lot of society has this now, which is when I have this, then I will addiction. What I mean by that is that for me, I wanted to be successful, then I would be inspiring. I wanted to achieve a lot, and then I could help others. And once I was successful, then I'd enjoy my life. And I think that very much nowadays it's so easy for us to focus just on this destination and miss out on the journey that it takes to get there. So when all this was happening, I ended up quitting my business. I handed off to a new CEO, and I went traveling, and I tried to figure out, number one, what happened to my dad, and number two, am I the only person who's experienced something like this, or are there other people in the world who also live in these so-called parallel worlds, one which people see and one which is very, very different. And on that journey, over the many, many years that I've now done this, I've had an opportunity to go to China, LA, I've spoken in multiple different places, and what I've learned has been amazing about the human psyche, and to think about why we do what we do as entrepreneurs, and how, like for now, as an example, I help a lot of entrepreneurs to live a great lifestyle whilst they boost their business success. And having that combination, I think, is of fundamental importance.
I think thanks for sharing that, and sorry to hear your loss, Ben. And it's just fascinating how you actually took that as an opportunity to really learn about people and the psychology. And it is so important for people. And especially we see a lot of entrepreneurs also burning out and trying to do the best they wanted to. But I mean, it is the hardest thing to do, in fact, to really create something and really see that problem that they are so passionate about. And now let's talk about, you talked about happiness is not a destination, it is a way of life, right?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit more about that, and why do you think that it is?
Well, I think very often, as I mentioned previously, I feel that there's these prerequisites. When I have this, then I'll be happy. When I have a wife, when I have $1 million in a bank, when I have this. But the truth is, having that is just a number. It doesn't actually change the way that you feel. So when I say that, happiness is a journey, not a destination, it's realizing that if you are not fulfilled and not enjoying yourself along this journey, you're missing out on the essence of life and what it is to be happy. And I think it's so easy for us to feel that there's this prerequisite and then we'll be happy. When I have that relationship, when I have this body, when I have like my health is optimal, then I will experience more happiness. But the truth is, if you can be happy right now, it's game changing, and suddenly you start to see that life doesn't need to be so hard, and you can slow down and actually enjoy it, as opposed to thinking that happiness is something that you have to reach for.
And you work with a lot of clients from around the world. Like, what do you think is the common pattern that you typically see among people that they most come to you with to help them with?
Well, I think what's incredibly common nowadays is this instant gratification of wanting things very quickly to happen in business and life. And to be honest, it's not surprising, given that most of what we have in life is instantaneous. We look at Amazon, next day delivery for pretty much anything. You go on Netflix, you can watch series back to back to back, and there's very few things in life that we actually have to wait for. And I think that the challenge there is that when you build a business, when you create a long-term relationship, when you think about building a successful career, these things take much longer compared to the instant gratification we're used to. So what I often see is people getting stressed and putting a lot of pressure on themselves to achieve a certain goal in a very short amount of time. And this is where entrepreneurs go through these cycles of working incredibly hard and then burning out, and working incredibly hard and then burning out. And there's oscillations that I think are incredibly common. And the flip side of things, speaking about another pattern, is there's often this perception of what the issue is. And I'll give you an example. So I had a guy come to me called Alex last year, and he said, Ben, I see how you market online. I'd love to be able to do marketing like you. Now, in my head, I'm thinking, I don't even do marketing. I'm not going to teach you marketing. What are you talking about? But I think it's important when someone reaches out that you have that conversation. So we started speaking. Within the first 5 minutes, I realized his issue isn't marketing. Yet for a lot of business owners, I need a business strategy. When I have this strategy, then everything will work out. And don't get me wrong, strategy is important, but in this case, it wasn't what he needed. So for him, we realized that he was a bit of a perfectionist. And it actually makes sense, because he's someone who's incredibly good at coding, right? He's got a software business, they build apps, they build mobile stuff. Coding is, he needs to be a perfectionist because that's very important so you don't have bugs. However, when you apply those same skills to marketing, suddenly it becomes incredibly challenging to achieve the same result because you're wanting everything to be perfect and then start marketing. So once he overcame this, suddenly he downsized his business by 3 times. He was working 16-hour days. Suddenly he stops doing that. And he now works a 40-hour work week, very standard. He was in Bali when all the COVID stuff was happening, and he 10x'd his business whilst keeping his team incredibly small. And thinking of the trajectory that he had versus the changes that he made, I think is so important for entrepreneurs to understand, because so often we want this more money, more business, when the truth is, if we can be more resourceful and understand our own patterns and we get out of our own way, suddenly our business can take a much higher trajectory.
Thanks for sharing that, because it is super important to understand, like, why we are doing things the way that we are doing, because that is super important, no matter what kind of business it is. And thanks for sharing that example, because yes, being a software engineer, I could definitely relate to it. And sometimes being a perfectionist can have a different kind of impact on us. And especially if you're a business owner or if you're a marketer. And a lot of times people, as you already mentioned before, people think that they need to become somebody in order to achieve some X, right? So
Yes.
how can people reverse engineer that? I think you might be a good person to help us understand how can people or anybody who's listening to this reverse engineer their psychology. Hey, like, let me become that to, and where can I go next?
Sure. So often when I speak to entrepreneurs, they're telling me what they want to be. They say, I want to be a successful business owner. I want to be a leader. I want to be inspiring. Oh, Ben, once I have a business, I'll be so confident. Oh, the women won't be able to handle me, right? And there's so many different aspects of us that we want to be. So the question that I often start with people is, tell me, who must you become in order to live the life that you want, right? If you were living that life already, what would you be being that you're not being now? And very often people will share things like that. I would be a leader. I'd be someone who can influence people. I will be someone who's incredibly organized, disciplined. And what often happens is there is this gap between who we are right now versus the person that we want to become. And what most entrepreneurs believe, and this is certainly what I believed at the time, is that I had to do certain things in order to be a certain way. And the challenge with that is we're a human being, not a human doing. Yet very often there's this prerequisite of we have to do all these things and then we can be that inspirational person. When the truth is, if you can actually encapsulate some of those essence of those beings now, so if you can start to be confident and you can start to be a leader and you start to think differently as if you were that person right now, what happens is it accelerates your success and your trajectory, and the way you think about things is different. Because very often I'll speak to someone, they say, Ben, I'm a startup, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Well, tell me, if you were a business owner, how would you be thinking differently right now? And suddenly the mind shifts, like what they focus on changes. And this is where I see a lot of entrepreneurs getting tunnel visioned in a certain way of thinking, in a certain, this is what I have to do and then I'll be successful. Whereas if they can get a different point of view, if they can take a step back from a different perspective, it then allows them to move forward in a way where they're actually enjoying the process and working smart, not hard, and being productive instead of just busy.
Hmm. And you mentioned about a lot of entrepreneurs having this struggle. And what about people who are just thinking to get started? Because I think these are some of the techniques that they can use right from the very beginning. So what would you tell them if somebody is listening to this? Hey, like, I wanted to do something and I think I have this opportunity, but I don't know where to get started. So how can they leverage these techniques in order to be very mindful of what they do?
That is fantastic. So for those listening who are thinking about it, feeling unsure, I've got a little story for you. So I want you to imagine that everyone is on a boat circling an island. So we're going round and round a little island. Everyone has a huge telescope. So they've got this big telescope and everyone's looking for that diamond. Right, they're looking for, when I see that diamond, oh, then I'm going to swim over there, I'm going to pick it up. So there's literally thousands of people on these boats going around the island with these telescopes, waiting for this diamond to appear. Years go by, and for some reason, no one sees a diamond. Until one day, one crazy guy jumps off the boat, swims to the island, and starts to search around and goes, oh, there's a ruby, there's an emerald, there's a diamond, and he starts seeing all these different things that he'd have never seen on a boat. And there are so many people listening to this, and so many people that will come to me who are still on the boat. They're waiting for that perfect opportunity, that right timing, this amount of money, this finance, and then I will do it. And the challenge that I would give those listening would be to jump, start to make it happen, because the actions that you take allow you to then make better decisions in due course. But if you're just thinking about it, the truth is that won't help your life move forward, and you won't gain those opportunities from just sitting on a boat.
That was amazing story, Ben, because the other day I was just talking to my team and talking to them having that momentum, because there is never going to be a perfect time to do something great that we would love to do. And you put it in a simple and a crisp story, and how can people see things differently? Because I think just having a different perspective, because maybe we were taught in a different way to kind of like, think in a one direction, and that really opens up our mindset. And now let's talk a little bit about, like, the way that you help entrepreneurs, and the way that you help them change their mind shift. So how can entrepreneurs or anybody be more courageous? Because that's something everybody should be able to do it, right?
Yeah, so when we look into courage, I always tell people that fear is the prerequisite to being courageous. So very often people say, I'm scared, I'm feeling fearful. I'll give you an example. So when I was practicing for my TED Talk, and I did a TED Talk in Chinese, and that was actually the first Chinese speech I've ever done. So you can just imagine, I was feeling a little nervous as an understatement, right? As a joke, like
Yeah.
honestly petrified. I learned the whole thing off by heart, and I speak around the world, I do stuff in English, but doing a word for word speech on like on a stage like that, I was feeling nervous and incredibly fearful at the time. And this is where suddenly you don't just become courageous consistently. In order to be courageous as an entrepreneur, it's constantly pushing yourself out of your comfort zone or being pulled towards something bigger than yourself. And for me, as I was there and I'm feeling a little bit scared, the reason why we don't take action, or the reason why we stay in fear, is often we get stuck in our head. And for those who are looking to be better speakers, right, this is one of the best pieces of advice that I can give, and that is that when you're on a stage, if you get out of your own head and think about why you're there, it makes it so much easier. And for me, when I'm like standing there, I'm feeling so nervous beforehand. I'm seeing the person speak on stage, I'm thinking I'm next. And for me, it's going through my head of, I'm doing this because I learned this speech to give back to people in Chinese. I wanted a way to be able to influence them in their own language that would really be impactful. And I'm there and I'm thinking about that, and suddenly the fear disappears and the courage comes through. And I think that for those listening, if you can think about who are you doing this for and get out of your own head and stop singing the me song, what often happens is that fear disappears, and then you can actually take action. It's not that fear will never be there, but when you take action, you can actually lean into that fear and do things and move things forward. It enables you to be more and more courageous, and it's a muscle that you work, just like decision making. When you become a leader and make fast decisions, you get better and better the more decisions you make. It's the same with courage. You can start to become more and more courageous, and then suddenly small things that used to be difficult suddenly become much, much easier.
Hmm. I can completely get that, Ben, because especially while I was in college days, I was super afraid of public speaking. And I remember those days when I got onto the stage, and, like, my left leg started shivering. Like, I don't know why this is happening. And I asked my mentor, like, is there any medicine that I can use to stop, like, be
Yes.
afraid of public speaking?
Yeah. And the truth is that can sometimes still happen. And I'll give an example. So, December gone, just before the lockdown, right? I was in China, and I was doing a talk for HSBC, a keynote speech, just for an hour. And I'm there. I arrive, and the venue's huge. There's like hundreds of people, and I remember being on stage, started speaking, and I could actually feel my hand shaking a little bit. And I'm thinking, what is going on? I teach this stuff. And the truth is, sometimes it's that nervousness. And for me, one of the best techniques for that is just to breathe. One of my favorite things before I go on stage is that as I stand there, I take a deep breath and I just look at everyone. And suddenly you realize everyone's looking at you, they're waiting. And that's when you feel like you've got that confidence, you've got them, and then you can go. And for me, that's a lovely pattern that I do of just breathing and taking that time for myself to center myself. before delivering. And I think that's really important for those listening. How do you apply that in your life? Maybe you're thinking, yeah, it's all good for you, Ben, doing a talk in front of those people. What about me every day? And this is where, when I think of those techniques, it's looking into how do you change your emotional state so that you can, despite the fear you're experiencing, still move forward. And I think that once again, it's a muscle that you train, and the better you get at it, suddenly it doesn't become so difficult anymore. And I think that as an entrepreneur, it's this journey, or it's an accelerated journey of growth,
Mm.
where you'll learn so many different facets about yourself, about all different parts of business. And it's that element that, if you can lean into, I think allows you to become better and better. And it's not about learning everything. It's about being better at adapting and pivoting and making those decisions fast, just like the year that we've experienced this year, to pivot, to twist, to change, to make those decisions quickly, to enable you to stay ahead of the crowd.
Mm. That's amazing, Ben, because whatever is that we wanted to do, I mean, like, no, failures are something that are going to help us learn a lot, because sometimes people are afraid because they're afraid of failure. And we see a lot of people who are successful in their life. They always say that, hey, like, no, failure is just a learning opportunity, and it is just not trying is actually the failing. So are there any incidents for you throughout your lifetime that you have that helped you to change that mind shift?
Oh, I have failed so many times, and I think that when we look into our lives and we think about the times we've failed, for me, I move away from that actual term failure, and I look at it as a learning opportunity. Because if I learn from something, I think that it's an opportunity for me to move forward. So I've done things where I was a jack of all trades to begin with in my career. I was designing the posters, sharing them. I've had times where I was speaking in China, and most of the audience are Chinese. They don't understand a word of what I'm saying. They just want to come along to a free talk and see, a white man chat about all these different things, and they really don't have a clue. And I remember asking questions, asking them to raise their hand, and I'd have just have one like white person about to raise their hand and no one else because they don't understand what I'm saying. And yeah, it's times like that which is growth. And I've had times where I've run a seminar, only a few people have come. I've run a seminar and put the wrong address on in London. Oh, that was terrible. I had people just turning up to the Hilton, literally next door to the venue that I was doing. So I think that in my life, I've had a fair amount of failures and a fair amount of learning opportunities. But ultimately, it's from that you grow as an entrepreneur. If you're not failing, you're probably doing something wrong. And this is where you have a lot of people talking about fail fast and make sure you're moving forward. And for me, it's about being smarter, using my resources in a wiser way, and being able to ultimately leverage what I have around me to have more of an impact.
Mm. And you meet thousands of people every year, and you give speeches in China, US, and all over the world. And what is that the best compliment that you received from audience?
Well, I've received a lot of compliments in my life. I mean, I often cry on stage. I have people crying and coming up to me saying that, that's, amazing story. I relate to it in so many different ways. It's amazing. But really, when I think of the times that have touched me the most, it's when, I've worked with someone that may be suicidal, and they send me a message saying, Ben, I'm in Bali. I'm lying on a beach. I can't believe you saved my life. I just want to send you a message to say thank you. And this is like a year, 2 years on from working with them. And it's moments like that of so much grace that I feel so grateful that I could be that light in someone's life to help them see a different way and help them move forward. And for me, I think that there's nothing more that fills me up than being able to have that impact on someone.
That's amazing, because like now when you see somebody's life trajectory is changing just because that you shared your message to them, it's incredible, like how we get connected to our stories. And that's exactly one of the reasons why I started this podcast. Like, I started saying, like, I'm afraid of, like, talking to new people, but this is something I really love and enjoy. And I started, like, with one interview and two interviews. I almost, like, fell in love with it, how
Yes.
incredible people are from around the world who like just wanted to connect and share their stories. And even I get like a lot of messages from my friends, hey, like, Venki, this is great, like, we are learning a lot, and thanks for sharing all these great stories. And that is not what I expected at the very beginning. And it's incredible how small things like that can make a huge impact. And now
Yes.
you help entrepreneurs and a lot of professionals with your techniques. And you also created your academy to help all these the coaches. the coaching as well. Tell us a little bit more about that and how can people take advantage of it, Ben?
Sure. So I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago. I had someone come up to me and they said, "Ben, could you teach me what you do?" And I looked at them square in the eyes and I said, "Absolutely not."
Is it a secret?
No, because Wenky, like honestly, to begin with, like I genuinely did not feel confident enough that I could give someone those skills because I'd spent years literally attending like hundreds of different courses and retreats. Like, how could I possibly bottle up that knowledge and all those nuggets to teach someone? So it took me about 6 months before I managed to collate enough knowledge and information that I could genuinely feel that I can give someone the skills and to have them not to just be a good coach. Because do you know, there are so many certifications out there, it's crazy. But I wanted to give them the best golden nuggets that I had experienced attending literally hundreds of different courses from China to San Francisco to San Diego to Fiji. I've gone on so many different programs. So for me, I wanted to get all the best golden nuggets and all the best techniques that I've used and to put them into a program that would really immerse someone. So previously it was 12 months because that's how long I felt I needed to get someone ready to be able to genuinely help someone at a very, very high level and make them outstanding. Now it's 6 months because I've got the right tools and programs and systems in place that I can help them with that. But that's been a journey, and for me, it's amazing to be able to work one-on-one and see the change in their life, as well as the skills that they then help others. And whether or not they then go on to set a business up and I help them with that, that's another thing. But to have those skills in and of themselves and the influence that they have on themselves and those around them has been amazing. And I've had people from Hong Kong, Switzerland, China, UK, from all over go through the program. And it's been amazing to see the difference that it's made in their lives and for all those around them.
That's amazing, Ben, because coaching is something that everybody needs to really truly understand what they are. Because and we see a lot of professionals. Yes, we have these great jobs, and how can people learn that? Like, let's say if a professional or a student who is listening to it and wanted to really unleash their true potential, how can people truly understand what they're doing is what they really like? Because sometimes we get into this the daily routine of 8 to 5 or whatever, being a
Sure.
student and trying to understand what they're really good at. Like, how can people understand what they truly can become?
Well, I think what is fascinating is that no one knows how someone's life will unfold. So I think you have to start with asking questions. And the truth is, as humans, I think innately we know if we're in the right place and if we're enjoying what we're doing. And whenever I look at working with someone, and I'll ask them questions that often remove beliefs that keep people where they are. So for example, the very common one that I ask is, if you had all the time in the world, all the money, and you couldn't fail, right, what would you do? And this just gives people permission to dream without the barriers that they have. And usually when someone tells me what they want to do, they say, "Oh, Ben, I'd love to have an organization where I start helping ecosystems around the world. I'd love to be able to have green energy. I'd love to be able to just have an impact." And at the moment they're a teacher, right? Just as an example. So in that case, I'd say, okay, so you've told me what you want. You've mentioned there's a few things. Why haven't you done it yet? And then they'll tell you, "Oh, I don't have time, I don't have money, blah, blah, blah." And suddenly there's this idea in their mind of what they could do. And this is where it's not about suddenly doing that immediately. Some people do. It's thinking about what would be a step in the right direction that would move me towards that. How can I move the needle just a little bit to do that? Maybe you start teaching in green ecology. Maybe you start going to some investment meetings. Maybe you set up a startup, a podcast, interviewing people in green technology. But you start making steps and small steps to help you move forward. And one of the things that I thought about was this concept called identity capital. What I mean by that are the skills you need to live the life you desire. So when I first started, I realized I need to be outstanding at coaching. If I'm not good at coaching, that's the bread and butter of what I do. If I'm not good at that, I'm in trouble. So I've got to be able to coach. And then I realized, well, I can be the best coach in the world, but if I don't know how to market, it doesn't matter diddly squat. I've got to be able to market, and I've got to be able to not just sell someone, but to enroll them in a really authentic way. And I think that was a huge challenge for me. I don't want to sell someone and push someone, but I also know I can help them, and that's having congruency in what I offer and to be able to push people not to their limit, but to overcome the fears that they may have, and have different things in place, money back guarantees, or like, give this a go, here's an example, to give people that opportunity so that the hurdles aren't there. And this is where, for those listening, I consider for yourselves, what skills do you need to really live that life you desire? And then there's other things that I thought about, like, how do I be more humorous on stage? How do I keep someone engaged? How do I make them smile, like laugh, smile, and really enjoy themselves? And I started to look into Michael McIntyre. I'd watch comedians, I'd see what they do, how they manage the stage, how they interact with their audience, and suddenly I started to model those skills. And I think that if you can start to upgrade yourself and upgrade your skills constantly, it allows you to move forward. And this is a never-ending journey. And I'll give you an example. When this year started, I was so excited. Oh my God, I can't even tell you. I had my stuff in China. I had so many different talks, workshops planned. It was crazy. I was honestly so excited. I had talks in London. I was in LA. I was getting so excited. And obviously after COVID hit, everything went down the drain. And suddenly, for myself, I'm leaning in, this is uncomfortable. I'm going to hire myself a business coach and figure out what to do and what to go on, so that I can figure out a new rebrand, change what I'm doing. And that's one of the first things that I leaned into, because if I didn't lean into that, it would have been incredibly challenging, because I'm so used to speaking offline, to then get people to work with me online. It was the bread and butter of my business. So I completely shifted that. I changed how I did things. I'm now used to Zoom workshops, and it's the background, right? So suddenly I'm shifting it. And I think that no matter who I speak to, we're constantly pivoting and innovating. And I think that's really important, that it's this never-ending process. And it's not that you grow and you're done. It's constantly evolving.
Absolutely, you're 100% right there, Ben, because we constantly need to evolve, and sometimes not thinking that we are good at something need not necessarily mean that we cannot do that, because everybody is a constant learner who actually did it
Yeah.
because they know that their shortfalls and they wanted to improve.
Yeah, and I think it's incredibly important to realize that every master was once a beginner.
Mhm.
And I feel that some people, they can't really see that. But if you look at anyone who's ever achieved anything in life and look at their journey, I guarantee they've spent years or decades working so hard to achieve things. And I was watching a conference the other day. The lady gets up on stage and says, here's to a 25-year overnight success. Because people see the overnight success, but they don't see the 25 years in the process. They don't see all the different things that you've done. I think it's incredibly important to look into biographies, stories, and figure out the time that someone has spent mastering their craft, mastering their business, laying the foundation to be able to move forward. And I felt that perspective and that appreciation can really help you move forward. And I was interviewing a man the other day on my podcast, and when he was speaking about losing millions of dollars, being in debt, losing his family, and I think, do I really have problems? And I had a client who had $1 billion business, lost everything, went to jail, his best friend stole his private jet, and I'm thinking, I cannot even fathom, that isn't even in my reality. And it's that perspective that I think is so nice for entrepreneurs to gain. And this is why I recommend to entrepreneurs to have mentors, have coaches, speak to people that can give you that different perspective, because it will enable you to grow so much more than perhaps what you're currently doing.
That's great stuff, Ben. And sometimes motivation is something that a lot of people lack, because yes, they think of doing this great thing, and of course they can do it, but over a period of time they learn that, hey, like, I don't have what it takes. Like, we give up very easily. Like, how can people motivate themselves for a longer periods of time? Because we have seen this hockey stick growth. For years people struggle and people pivot and people do try different things, and that's exactly what you shared in that example a while ago. 25 years of, like, overnight success. Like,
Yes.
how can people stick to what they wanted to achieve and pivot to get to where they wanted to go?
Well, I think when I look into answering this, it reminds me of being in a lunch queue. So if you've ever been in a queue for lunch, often you start at the back of the queue and then you wait there, like half an hour goes by and you think, oh man, this is taking ages. And you look at somewhere else and you think, oh, that queue's so much shorter, I'll go over there. So then you go to a different queue and you realize, oh, this is taking even longer. But you're at the back of this queue and you're thinking, oh, so I'll wait here. You wait there an hour. You haven't even moved. You're thinking, oh, this is terrible. This is awful. So then you go to another queue. And this is very much a representative of what people are like in business. It's the shiny penny syndrome. Oh, that looks so much better, let's do that. Oh, that looks like a great strategy, let me do that. And what's very common is that people want to be great at a song. What I mean by that is that they want a great strategy, a Facebook ad strategy, a growth hacking strategy. They want a song, a particular thing. But if you don't become a musician, where you understand the underlying strategy and not just the tactic, what tends to happen is that it can become very challenging when that song doesn't work anymore. And I often see entrepreneurs going from tactic to tactic, song to song, and looking to do this as opposed to thinking about laying that foundation of a musician so that you can really understand the principles from which to move and leverage and how to move yourself forward. And for those listening who really are not sure if it's right for them and they're feeling demotivated, right? One of the first things I'd say is recharge. I'll give you an example. Today, honestly, I was feeling pretty relaxed. To be honest, I woke up at 5, I did my stuff, I nailed it, I got everything that I needed done, but I was done by about 11 a.m. I'm thinking, right, I'm going on holiday tomorrow. What do I want to do? And I said, you know what, I want to chill out. So I did. And I think that that's important to relax. And I'm saying this from my own experience because it'd be so easy for me to say, okay, Ben, let's get on that podcast, let's reorganize those things. And there's always work to do. Yet what I find is that if you can take a step back and relax and recharge, you then can move forward in a different way. And as opposed to being pushing and pushing and pushing, you have to bear in mind that motivation is like a shower, right? You need to take it daily, and it's something that doesn't just arise and stay with you. Instead, you want to keep yourself constantly inspired and working towards things. And what I often see, and this is what demotivates people, is they set this huge long-term goal that they want to achieve, right? I want to have 100,000 followers this year. And suddenly, if they don't feel like they're achieving it, they get disheartened and they give up. So one of the best ways that I find to counteract that is do something where it's a little bit different. So most people set a calendar year, right? I'm sure I know I've done this myself. I think this is pretty common standard. 2020, okay, what do I want to achieve by the end of 2020? Now, most people aren't going to achieve what they set in the beginning of 2020 because 2020 has been a bit of a different year. However, if instead you choose to set something called power year goals, what I mean by that is 3 months. Because most entrepreneurs overestimate what they can do in a year, but they underestimate what they can do in a decade. But 3 months is a fantastic period of time where you can actually have a focus and a desire and an aim that you want to accomplish. So this is what I say to people. I say, right, set a 3-month power year goal. What is it that you want to achieve? Now, suddenly, it's a short enough period of time to keep you motivated, to keep you inspired, and you see a finish line. And you think, wow, boom, you focus, you're directed, you don't get distracted by other cues or other shiny pennies. You actually know exactly what you're working towards, and suddenly you feel that motivation, you get excited, and you know if you're on or off track and you can move forward. Then after that, you can re-strategize, work again. And what I see is people make so much progress in 3 months, literally the same amount of progress they make in 12 months because they're so focused and diligent and working on that. And then give yourself a break, chill out. I think that's so important. There's too many entrepreneurs working hard and hard and hard and burning out. One of the biggest takeaways I'd say from today is go have some fun. Go have a glass of wine, play some mini golf, chill out with friends. And I think that that is so important, and especially missing nowadays with all the lockdown happening, that we don't give ourselves a break. So I really would like to encourage that, to really reinstall that motivation and creativity to help you move forward.
Thanks for sharing those wonderful tips, Ben. And for those of you listening, just take a break and really understand why you're doing things this way, and take a break and just relax. And you also mentioned some great stuff throughout this podcast, Ben. How can people reach out to you if they wanted to connect with you and learn more about what you are going to offer to them?
Sure, so there's a few different ways people can stay in contact. On most social media, you can get me at Ben Ivey, so BenIvey. You can connect with me on my website, so ben-ivey.com. So once again, Ivey. And then you can have a listen to the podcast that I've launched, Entrepreneurial Lifestyle with Ben Ivey. It's available on most platforms. And connect, reach out. I'm more than happy to share some resources to help you on your journey and keep you inspired as you build your dreams.
That's awesome, Ben. Thank you so much. I learned a ton talking to you, and thank you so much for inspiring our audience and sharing your wonderful story. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Amazing. Thank you so much.